We already rolling? All right, so we left last week on 74, right? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's where I found
Yes.
the ruler. I found
Yes.
the ruler. Are we on the left side or the right side? I believe it's the left side.
Left side.
Okay, those ignorant.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so this subtitle says, those ignorant of their indebtedness are nothing more than talented animals. Does everybody remember what we were just talking about last week and why we would start out at this point by saying those ignorant of their indebtedness are nothing more than talented animals? Does everybody remember what the first part of this chapter is about? It's explaining the profound debt owed to the Lotus Sutra by bodhisattvas, human and heavenly beings, and also the people of the two vehicles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, so what he's basically saying here in the subtitle, then, the Gosha will read it out. Let me just start by reading it because this is from the Gosha. Okay. Those ignorant of their indebtedness are nothing more than talented animals on page 74, first column. The various Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and heavenly and human beings described in the sutras that preceded the lotus may seem to have gained enlightenment through the particular sutras in which they appear. But in fact, they attained enlightenment only through the Lotus Sutra. The general vow taken by Shakyamuni and other Buddhists to save countless living beings find fulfillment through the Lotus Sutra. This is the meaning of the passage of the sutra that states that the vow has now been fulfilled. Does everybody understand what that says? Okay, in other words, all Buddhas, he's qualifying here, all Buddhas attain Buddhahood through Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay? It doesn't matter if they, as an expedient means, appeared in provisional teachings and you read that they attained Buddhahood in the particular provisional sutra, but in fact that's also, again, an expedient means. Shakyamuni attained Buddhahood through Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Does everybody understand? Everybody's with me?
Yes.
All right, so the original enlightenment is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Understand that, all right? In view of these facts, I believe that the devotees and followers of the Flower Garland, Meditation, Mahavajrayana, and other sutras will undoubtedly be protected by the Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and heavenly beings of the respective sutras that they uphold. But if the votaries of the Mahavajrayana, Meditation, and other sutras should set themselves up as the enemies of the votary of the Lotus Sutra, then the Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and heavenly beings will abandon them and will protect the Lotus Sutra. I, Nichiren, think as follows. Okay, so he's qualifying here what his perspective on this is. The gods of the sun and the moon and the other deities were present in the two places and the three assemblies when the Lotus Sutra was preached. If a votary of the Lotus Sutra should appear then, like iron drawn to a magnet or the reflection of the moon appearing in the water, they will instantly come forth to take on his sufferings for him and thereby fulfill the vow that they made in the presence of the Buddha. But they have yet to come and inquire of my well-being. Does this mean that I am not a votary of the Lotus Sutra? If that is so, then I must examine the text of the sutra once more in light of my conduct and see where I am at fault. Everybody's with me? Yeah. The various Buddhist schools of Nichiren's day were unaware that among all Shakyamuni's teachings, the Buddha of the lifespan chapter is the Buddha who should be taken as the object of devotion in one's Buddhist practice for attaining enlightenment. Not only were they ignorant of this, but they made their own arbitrary interpretations that further obscured and distorted the Buddha's true teaching. The latter day of the law is a time when evil monks appear and obscure the correct teaching. As a result, the truth of the Lotus Sutra is lost, and eventually the various schools of Buddhism become confused about the correct object of devotion. Do you understand? It's all about what is the correct object of devotion in the latter day. The Daishonin strictly refutes the views held by the schools of his day about the object of devotion and about attaining enlightenment. He pronounces that they have gone astray, failing to recognize the fundamental Buddha expounded in the lifespan chapter, who possesses the seed of enlightenment. He compares these misguided schools of Buddhism to the heir of the supreme ruler of a state, who, confused about the identity of his own father, disparages him and believes someone else to be the real king. And just like the child who does not know his own father, the adherents of schools who are ignorant of the Buddha of the lifespan chapter likewise do not understand to whom they are obligated. While they might appear to be knowledgeable about Buddhism, Nichiren sharply denounces them as no more than talented animals. Now, how is this most significant to us as Nichiren Buddhists? This is a very important teaching. It's not specific, but it's actually very specific to right now. A circumstances that didn't exist when he wrote it, but a circumstance that does exist now. What did I just talk about? Again. The Daishonin strictly refutes the views held by the schools of his day about the object of devotion. Okay, what's he referring to then?
The different schools.
The different schools, but what about the different schools? What is it that he's taking issue with the structure of their belief set? He's saying that they are embracing the wrong object of devotion. That the object of devotion is the Buddha of beginningless time, the Buddha of Kuan-Ganjo, hidden in the depths of the Lotus Sutra. That's what the manifestation of the Gohonzon actually is. Okay? Understand that. So that's what he's saying. These other schools couldn't possibly achieve actual Ichinen Sanzen because they didn't have access to the original teacher. The original teacher is the correct object of devotion. That's what this is really saying. Okay? And even today, why did I pull this out and say, how is this significant as a Nichiren believer? Does anybody think they might know where I'm coming from? I chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. What is the difference between me chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo and others that might be chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo throughout the world? The teacher, the teaching, and the object of devotion that I'm embracing. I could be chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. I could be chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo to a fox. I could be chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo to what I think is Shakyamuni. Okay? Yes. I could be chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo to all kinds of things. Okay? This is all about correct teacher, correct teaching, correct object of devotion. Always. Okay? That's the thing that differentiates. That's the thing that validates. That's the thing that creates actual Ichinen Sanzen. That's the point of differentiation. That's what the Daishonin is talking about. He's qualifying. There's absolutely a point of differentiation here. If you would understand the true identity of the entity of the mystic law, you could attribute it to something else, and without knowing that, slander. Okay? As a matter of fact, what is he saying? He's saying that these other practitioners of the other schools are actually slandering. Why? Because they're bad people? No. Because they're rejecting the teaching of the Lotus Sutra, which says, don't practice the provisional teachings in the latter day. All right? Now, with that perspective, let me reread it. The Daishonin strictly refutes the views held by the schools of his day about the object of devotion and about attaining enlightenment. In other words, he qualifies actual Ichinen Sanzen. Buddhahood in your present form. All right? Everybody else is still talking about provisional teachings, and you're going to attain Buddhahood when you go to a Buddha land. After many lifetimes of trying, right? He pronounces that they have gone astray, failing to recognize the fundamental Buddha expounded in the lifespan chapter who possesses the seed of enlightenment. Okay? He's the one that perceives this Buddha. Nobody had perceived this Buddha prior to him. Okay? That's why this Buddha is the sower of the seed. Okay, that's why it's the Buddhism of the sowing, because it's the Buddhism of this Buddha that sows the seed. Do you understand? The original teacher, the seed sower of all things. Understand that. All right, so he's saying he compares these misguided schools of Buddhism, misguided. He doesn't say they're terrible, evil, but they're misguided, to the air. He gives an example. He says it's like somebody that's a prince but doesn't know who his father, the king, actually is, and starts disrespecting him in public without realizing that that's actually his father and the basis of why he's a prince. All right? He says he compares these misguided schools of Buddhism to the heir of the supreme ruler of a state who, confused about the identity of his own father, disparages him and believes someone else to be the real king. Because what do all these other schools believe in? These provisional schools. Does the true word praise Shakyamuni? Does the Nimbutsu praise Shakyamuni? Does the Zen praise Shakyamuni? No. Does the precepts ultimately? No. In other words, the bottom line is all these other Buddhas are being praised. Flower Garland Sutras, all the Bodhisattvas have made all those pronouncements. It wasn't Shakyamuni that said all this cool shit in the Flower Garland Sutra. Okay? It was the Bodhisattvas he was able to conjure up because he had attained the way for the first time under the Bodhi tree. Do you understand? He wasn't the teacher. In almost all the provisional teachings, Shakyamuni's not the teacher. It's in the Lotus Sutra that he comes out and he starts saying this stuff. Boom, 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 boom. Other than that, he's actually, in many instances, like a corroborator of somebody that appears to make pronouncements, okay? Like Mahavrochana or whatever. All right, so he's saying, and believe someone else to be the real king. They don't recognize it's this eternal Buddha. And just like a child who does not know his own father, the adherents of schools who are ignorant of the Buddha of the lifespan chapter, which is the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come one, likewise do not understand to whom they are obligated. Okay? So what's the entire premise here? The correct object of devotion. All right? To have the correct focus of appreciation for the correct circumstance to be appreciative of. Do you understand? And that's the predicate, that's the gateway to good fortune. All right? That's what creates your good fortune and your access to your own Buddhahood being able to present itself in a single lifetime. While they might appear to be knowledgeable about Buddhism because they know a lot of stuff theoretically.
Oh, yeah.
All right? Nichiren sharply denounces them as no more than talented animals because they don't understand who their true father is. He's saying that's like an animal. An animal doesn't really understand mom and dad after birth, right? It's an instinctive thing, all right? So, returning to our main subject about the heavenly deities protecting the Lotus Sutra, Nichiren voices his belief that the bodhisattvas who attained enlightenment through hearing the Lotus Sutra would surely come forth instantly to protect the votary of the Lotus Sutra in keeping with the vow they made in the presence of the Buddha, like they did at Tatsunokuchi. That being the case, however, why was it that they failed to appear to protect him? In summing up the first section, Nichiren once more emphasizes this doubt because he knows it's a doubt everybody else might have that's a believer of his, and certainly something that other people will use to attack those believers when they try and propagate his teaching. All right? This doubt, in summing up the first section, Nichiren once more emphasizes this doubt, asking, does this mean I am not a votary of the Lotus Sutra? Straight on, he confronts that. He also goes so far as to say, if that is so, then I must examine the text of the sutra once more in light of my conduct and see where I am at fault. Because he's saying the reason that I consider myself to be the votary of the Lotus Sutra is why? Because I'm actually living the teaching of the sutra itself. I've been banished. I'm being attacked by the three powerful enemies. I'm the one that, is encountering everything that is described in the encouraging devotion. That's where we're going to get into this whole thing in the next chapter about the three pronouncements and all that. Okay, so do you understand? All right, so he says, where am I?
I must accept.
Where, right here? Okay, pardon me. Okay, in this way, he sets the stage for the next section of his discussion, which I will take up in detail another time. All right? Further on down in the next chapter. The object of devotion is the entity of the life of the votary of the Lotus Sutra. Now, does everybody understand that? What's that say then? The object of devotion is the entity of the life of the votary of the Lotus Sutra. It's the entity of eternal Buddha nature. Do you understand? Okay, so let's break that down. The object of devotion, the Gohonzon,
Right.
is the entity of the life of the votary of the Lotus Sutra. Okay? But as bodhisattvas of the earth, what are we? Votaries of the Lotus Sutra, because there's no separation between us and the original teacher. We're the original disciples, right? This is what we by becoming a bodhisattva of the earth, we return to our original state, right? So he's saying that the entity of the life of the votary of the Lotus Sutra. So you should understand that the Gohonzon is the actual entity of the law, the entity of the life of the Lotus Sutra, but that there is in no way a separation between that life and your own life. Do you understand? That's very important. That's why you can say the Gohonzon is you, when in reality the Gohonzon isn't you. It's your relationship to the Gohonzon that makes the Gohonzon you. That's what this is qualifying. Only by virtue of that original teacher can you become a votary of the Lotus Sutra. Do you understand that? Without that original teacher, there's no teaching that allows you to become a votary of the Lotus Sutra. That's how you become the Buddha, is your relationship with the original teacher. That all makes sense, right? That's why he said, it may seem that they became enlightened by virtue of their other sutras, the provisional sutras, but in fact they all attained Buddhahood through, pardon me, where is it? Hang on. I can't see where I just read it. Doggone it. Hang on. Okay, it's right there right in front of me. Pardon me. He says the various Buddhas, bodhisattvas in the middle, on just right there where I started. The various Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and heavenly and human beings. All right. Now those are the five categories of people that that he had discussed previously that should have this profound debt of gratitude to the Lotus Sutra. Why? Because it's the teaching that allows that whole group of people to attain Buddhahood. Right. All right. So, described in the sutra that preceded may seem to have gained enlightenment through the particular sutras in which they appear. They appear in this sutra. The sutra says that they attained enlightenment through the teachings of this sutra. The Daishonin is saying, but in fact they attained enlightenment only through the Lotus Sutra. Okay, so it's only through the Lotus Sutra that votaries of the Lotus Sutra can occur. In the absence of being a votary of the Lotus Sutra, you're not a bodhisattva of the earth, right? That's the extension of the original teacher and the original disciple. The oneness of mentor and disciple. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay, so everybody's with me. Correct? The object of devotion is the entity of the life of the votary of the Lotus Sutra, inseparable from your own. Nichiren's discussion in the first section focuses on the promise of protection for those who uphold the Lotus Sutra by the persons of the two vehicles, bodhisattvas and others, who first learned of the teaching for attaining Buddhahood in the Lotus Sutra and achieved enlightenment as a result. All right, that would be all Buddhas, right? His purpose, we can surmise, is to highlight the fact that the protective workings of the heavenly deities are activated through the power of the mystic law, the teaching for attaining Buddhahood. Everybody understands that? They're activated through the power of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Right? That's what that's saying, correct?
Yes.
All right? And that teaching of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the teaching for attaining Buddhahood. Right? There is no other teaching that brings Buddhahood. Actual Ichinen Sanzen is only achieved through the original teacher's original teaching of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Do you understand? It's never presented as something that's an expedient means. Expedient means are for the purpose to bring people from one point to another point. It doesn't deliver them to salvation. The salvation only occurs from actual Ichinen Sanzen. The realization that you are the Buddha exactly as you are. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, put another way, The fundamental nature of enlightenment, what is that? What's the fundamental nature of enlightenment?
Buddha.
Our Buddha nature. It's the fundamental nature of our life consists of both good and evil, correct? The fundamental nature of our existence that's good is this fundamental nature of enlightenment. The other one's the devil of the sixth heaven, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, put another way, the fundamental nature of enlightenment manifests as the heavenly deities. Do you know what he's saying there then? The aspect of your life, not deities that are outside waiting to sprinkle down like Tinkerbell. Do you follow? They're not already outside of you, looking over you, listening to you, doing things for you. He's explaining this very clearly so that you don't misunderstand. Right? Put another way, the fundamental nature of enlightenment, our Buddhahood, manifests as the heavenly deities, or the protective workings of the universe. Do you understand?
Yeah.
All right. That's why the heavenly deities are said to abandon a land that is filled with slander of the law. All right? However, because there's nobody emanating them. They don't exist outside of life. If everybody's slandering the law, no one is emanating these protective Buddhist deities, quote-unquote deities. They're not really deities. They're the fundamental nature of your life in the first place. You either receive good, bad, or neutral, right? That's called karma. That's the law of karma, right? So that's what this is talking about. Good, deities, heavenly deities. Bad, devil of the sixth heaven. Still, both are two sides of the same coin, the fundamental nature of your existence. So what comes out is based on you. It's not about an innate value. All right? Put another way, the fundamental nature of enlightenment manifests as the heavenly deities or the protective workings of the universe. That's why the heavenly deities are said to abandon a land that is filled with slander of the law. However, even in an evil age rife with such slander, if there is a votary of the Lotus Sutra who protects and spreads the mystic law, the heavenly deities will protect that person. Okay? That's why we never lose. Okay? Even though we have to face adversity. No matter how evil the times, the heavenly deities will search out a person who struggles for the sake of Buddhism. The fundamental nature of Buddhahood in that person's life will manifest and will rigorously protect him or her. This is because such a person is embraced by the mystic law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo throughout the three existences of past, present, and future, and becomes an entity that is one with the mystic law. Let me say that again. This is because such a person is embraced by the mystic law throughout the three existences of past, present, and future. Now, why would that be able to be the case? What if I just now found out about Nam-myoho Renge-kyo? What if, why would that be the case? This is because such a person is embraced by the mystic law throughout the three existences of past, present, and future. What's such a person? This person that manifests the fundamental nature of enlightenment, because that's, but the Buddha nature of his life is what's going to manifest those deities. But again, I get back to this question: why is it saying this is because such a person is embraced by the mystic law, by Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, throughout the three existences of past, present, and future? The simultaneity of cause and effect. When you achieve actual Ichen and Senzen, okay, you change the karmic structure of your existence permanently and forever. Do you understand? Okay, so you are embraced by that. That's just when you assume your true identity, correct? As a bodhisattva of the earth, you are now a Buddha in your present form. Right? Okay, so such a person is, do you understand? So the three existences, the mystic law. Now you're tuned in forever. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? Okay, so that is one with the mystic law. All right, that is a bodhisattva of the earth, a person that's achieving actual Ichinen Senzen. Was that funny? No. Okay. In discussing the protection extended by the person of the two vehicles, bodhisattvas and others, Nichiren proclaims his view that the votary of the Lotus Sutra is a person who practices the mystic law, the teaching for attaining Buddhahood, and who fights against slander of the law. So that could be any of us doing that correct practice. Do you understand?
Yes.
In the latter day of the law, the mystic law manifests only in the life of a votary of the Lotus Sutra. Do you understand? The actual mystic law is out there. You can read it as Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, but it only is in a manifest state for those that are practicing in the correct teaching. All right?
Yeah.
To the correct object of devotion, who have inherited that through the correct teacher.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Elsewise, they would not perceive those things correctly, and would not be able to manifest the effect. In the latter day of the law, the mystic law manifests only in the life of the votary of the Lotus Sutra, both the doctrine of the mutual possession of the 10 worlds revealed in the expedient means chapter. That's theoretical Ichinen Senzen, right?
Yeah.
And the mystic law that is the seed of enlightenment, elucidated through the explanation of the Buddha's actual attainment in the remote past in the lifespan chapter, right? That's actual Ichinen Senzen, exists nowhere but in the life of a votary of the Lotus Sutra. Okay? Because you will go through the theoretical aspect before you enter the actual aspect. But you will experience both of them in a single lifetime exactly as you are. Do you understand? All right. Therefore, in the record of the orally transmitted teachings, Nichiren says the object of devotion is thus the entity of the entire life of the votary of the Lotus Sutra. We can find the object of devotion, which serves as a mirror and guide in our Buddhist practice for attaining enlightenment, in the life of the votary of the Lotus Sutra. That is why Nichiren says of these questions concerning the protection of the heavenly deities and the identity of the votary of the Lotus Sutra, this doubt lies at the heart of this piece I am writing, and it is the most important concern of my entire life. It is also why the opening of the eyes is said to reveal the object of devotion in terms of the person. I'll reread that last paragraph and go through it a little more slowly. Therefore, in the record of the orally transmitted teachings, Nichiren says the object of devotion is thus the entity of the entire life of the votary of the Lotus Sutra. Now, what is that saying? The entity of the entire life. Now, when he says the entity of the entire life, what is he qualifying? Why would he stick that of the entire life? Because there is no separation between that entity and you. That's not a separate being. That's not a separate entity. Do you understand? Your life contains the entire universe.
Yes.
All right? So there is no, your entire life has no separation with anything. That's the point. Do you understand? So again, therefore, in the record of the orally transmitted teaching, Nietzsche, that's why I'm trying to qualify. We could look at this. The object of devotion is the entity of the life of the votary of the Lotus Sutra. Oh, the Gohonzon is Nichiren. Oh, let's pray to Nichiren. Let's worship Nichiren. Let's bow down in front of the great deity, Nichiren. That's what this is qualifying. There is no separation between Nichiren and you. There's no difference between Nichiren and you. Nichiren was an ordinary human being just like you. He achieved actual Ichinen Senses through the same process he has taught you. That's what this teaching is. All right? Don't misunderstand that. It's absolutely imperative that you perceive the Gohonzon correctly as the entity of the law, as the very life of the eternal Buddha, as the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo thus come one. It's also very important that you realize that there is no separation between what I just described and you. You become an extension, literally an extension, when you assume your true identity as a bodhisattva of the earth and become a manifest part of that process. Your purpose of manifestation Your purpose of manifesting in this Sahe world is widespread propagation. That's it. It's mercy. It's compassion. It's the only reason you come back. And to get all the goodies that go along with that suffering. Okay? Called life. Yeah. Sex, food, fun, happiness. You know, not droid, you know. No. When the bodhisattvas come out of the earth, bodhisattvas come out dancing. This is a fun, uplifting process. That's the way that Aishonin embraces it. That's the way he embraces it in his writings. That's the way President Ikeda teaches the teaching. That's the way we're supposed to live our life. Joy is the goddamn, objective. Joy, joy, joy. Okay? So it's not suffering and persevering through a bunch of shit that never ends. It's winning. It's being the Buddha. Everybody with me?
Yes.
All right. I'll read it one last time. Therefore, in the record of the orally transmitted teachings, Nichiren says the object of devotion is thus the entity of the life of the votary, the entity of the entire life of the votary of the Lotus Sutra. We can find the object of devotion, which serves as a mirror and guide in our Buddhist practice for attaining enlightenment, in the life of the votary of the Lotus Sutra, in the life of each person that embraces the Gohonzon correctly. That is why Nichiren says of these questions concerning the protection of the heavenly deities and the identity of the votary of Lotus Sutra, this doubt lies at the heart of this piece I am writing and is the most important concern of my entire life. It also is why the opening of the eyes is said to reveal the object of devotion in terms of the person. Because if he doesn't answer this as it relates to his life, we will never have an answer as it relates to our own. Do you understand? This is the key. This is the key. That's why he's laying all this out. Because when you go through difficulty, why aren't I difficulty-free? Why don't I get to live this life that's protected by all those people that vowed that they would protect me and I don't ever catch any shit? Because I'm a votary of the Lotus Sutra. So was Nichiren. That's the whole point. So if Nichiren caught it, so will we. You with me? Yeah. All right, chapter 8. The six difficult and 9 easy acts. To discard the shallow and seek the profound is the way of a person of courage. Page 77. Okay, everybody's with me? Yes. You already know what the 6 difficult and 9 easy acts are, right? What their function and purpose is. What's the function and the purpose what's the illustration of what's the purpose of illustration of the 6 difficult and 9 easy acts?
Difficult.
That's always the answer to
difficulty. Difficulty to believe.
Yeah, but it's also to qualify one step beyond that. Again, to discard the shallow and seek the profound. All right. So, in other words, what we think is difficult is difficult. But it's easy when you compare it to the difficulty of holding the law in the latter day. Of meeting the correct teacher, finding the correct object of devotion, practicing the correct teaching. Do you understand? All right, so he says, starting on page 77, by tasting a single drop, one can tell the flavor of the great ocean, and by observing a single flower in bloom, one can predict the advent of spring. One does not have to cross the water to far-off Sung, China, spend 3 years traveling to Eagle Peak in India, enter the palace of the Dragon King the way Nagarjuna did, visit Bodhisattva Maitreya in the Tushita heaven the way Bodhisattva Asanga did, or be present at the 2 places and 3 assemblies when Shakyamuni preached the Lotus Sutra, in order to judge the relative merits of the Buddha's lifetime teachings. Do you understand what he's saying there? Okay? If you have the correct perspective, you didn't have to actually be there for any of this. Your wisdom as a bodhisattva of the earth is the wisdom of the Buddha. You'll be able to perceive the truth on your own. All right? He says, it is said that snakes can tell 7 days in advance when a flood is going to occur. This is because they are akin to dragons, who make the rain fall. Crows can tell what lucky or unlucky events are going to take place throughout the course of a year. This is because in a past existence, they were diviners. Birds are better at flying than human beings, and I, Nichiren, am better at judging the relative merits of sutras than Ching Quan of the Flower Garland School, Chia Sung of the Three Treatises School, Su In of the Dharma Characteristics School, and Kobo of the True Word School. That is because I follow in the footsteps of the teachers Tentai and Dingyo. If Ching Quan and others had not accepted the teachings of Tentai and Dingyo, how could they have expected to escape the sin of slandering the law? Everybody's with me? Mm-hmm. I, Nichiren, am the richest man in all of present-day Japan. I have dedicated my life to the Lotus Sutra, and my name will be handed down in ages to come. If one is lord of the great ocean, then all the gods of the various rivers will obey one. If one is the king of Mount Sumeru, then the gods of the numerous other mountains cannot help but serve one. If a person fulfills the teachings of the 6 difficult and 9 easy acts of the Lotus Sutra, then even though he may not have read the entire body of sutras, all should follow him. Everybody's with me? Yes. Okay. Struggling for the law in accordance with the Buddha's will and decree. What is that? What is that? What is struggling for the law in accordance with the Buddha's will and decree?
Because you are vow.
You absolutely, because of your vow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What does that make you then? Struggling for the law in accordance with the Buddha's will and decree makes you a bodhisattva of the earth. Now, obviously, you've taken the vow if you're a bodhisattva of the earth. Living the vow is actually that process of struggling for the law in accordance with the Buddha's will, widespread propagation, and decree. No matter what obstacles, never retreat. All right? In the opening of the eyes, Nichiren Daishonin establishes that he is the devotee of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law, the current era, by examining various passages of that sutra. In particular, he considers the 3 pronouncements of the treasure tower, the 11th chapter, the 2 admonitions of the Devadatta, the 12th chapter, and the description of the 3 powerful enemies in the 20-verse section of the encouraging devotion, the 13th chapter. The 3 pronouncements of the Treasure Tower chapter represent 3 viewpoints Shakyamuni expresses on the importance of spreading the Lotus Sutra after his passing, each accompanied with a call to the gathered bodhisattvas to shoulder this mission. We'll examine these pronouncements in detail shortly. The 2 admonitions of the Devadatta chapter refer to Shakyamuni's disclosure that even evil people and women can attain Buddhahood. He thus indicates that after his passing, the assembled bodhisattvas should spread the Lotus Sutra, the teaching of enlightenment, and work to enable all people living in the evil age of the latter day of the law to obtain the supreme state of life. To obtain this supreme state of life. Nichiren refers to the 3 pronouncements and the 2 admonitions collectively as the 5 proclamations. The specific term he uses for proclamation originally meant the words or decree of an emperor. He uses it here to indicate words expressing the Buddha's will or the Buddha's injunction. Propagation of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day is the Buddha's will and decree. Everybody's with me so far, right? Right. After hearing this will and decree, the 800,000 million Nayutas of Bodhisattvas gathered at the assembly respond in the encouraging devotion chapter by vowing to propagate the Lotus Sutra after Shakyamuni's passing. Their vow contains the description of the 3 powerful enemies. That's what I read to you a few weeks ago. Do you remember? All right. That is, they pledge to widely spread the sutra even if they should encounter intense persecution at the hands of such formidable adversaries. And so once again, that's acknowledging that even though they're saying they're going to protect people in the future, they're qualifying already that they know they're going to be attacked themselves. All right? In that process. Yes. Becoming true teachers, correct teachers, teachers of the law. You. Citing these sutra passages, the Daishonin demonstrates that he is the votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law, regardless of whether it appears that he's being protected or not. Do you understand? That's the whole reason why he's writing this. To qualify the fact that even though he's on Sado Island, they didn't cut his head off, and nobody knows yet that they're gonna pardon him. Okay, they haven't pardoned him yet as he's writing this, but that is what actually occurs. All right? So he says, citing these sutra passages, and again, the purpose of this is to tell everybody in advance, hide and watch. Hide and watch. Don't give up. Hang in there. Wait and see what happens. I have faith in what's going to happen. I don't know for sure what's going to happen, but I know I am going to be protected. I am going to be victorious. All right? Citing these sutra passages, the fact that I don't seem to be right now doesn't mean I'm not being protected. It doesn't mean that my teaching is correct. It doesn't mean that I'm not a votary of Lotus Sutra. All right? Citing the sutra passages, the Daishonin demonstrates that he is the votary of Lotus Sutra in the latter day. It also becomes evident from these passages that the hallmark of a votary is fighting against slander of the law in this defiled age. In other words, a true votary is one who responds to the Buddha's will and decree by actively taking on the challenge to propagate the sutra, fully aware that great trials and obstacles lie ahead, as is described in the Encouraging Devotion chapter. Do you understand? That whole 20-line verse, okay? That's what he's talking about. The Daishonin indicates this concisely, and it's because Nichiren ran into all that shit that he could say, okay, now I know I have the correct teaching. Mm-hmm. My teaching of the Buddhism of the sowing is the correct teaching for the latter day. All right? Fully aware that, okay, the Daishonin indicates this concisely on practicing the Buddha's teachings. Gosho. This is indeed an accursed time to live in this land. However, the Buddha has commanded me to be born in this age, and it is impossible for me to go against the decree of the Dharma king. And so, as the sutra dictates, I have launched the battle between the provisional and the true teachings. Okay, that's from a different Gosho, obviously. By writing, this is indeed an accursed time to live in this land, however, Nichiren isn't actually lamenting his misfortune at having been born in a troubled time. Rather, he is indicating his readiness and determination to battle the evil that abounds in it. But when the Daishonin was being harshly persecuted and seemingly not receiving protection from the heavenly deities, many in society, this time while he was on Sado, while he's writing Opening of the Eyes, all right, many in society, even some of his disciples, doubted whether he could really be the Lotus Sutra's votary because he didn't appear to be receiving protection. You've been exiled to Sado. You're going to die there. You're living in some cemetery with, everybody's out to kill you, It ain't looking good, brother. And they're really giving us shit while you're over on that island. All right? In response, he asserts that the votary described in the Lotus Sutra is one who is personally prepared to launch the battle between the provisional and the true teachings, knowing that great persecution is inevitable. He don't care about the great persecution. He already strapped that on a long time ago. He perceived that truth when he decided to preach his teaching. The onslaught of persecutions that befell the Daishonin were certainly not a result of passivity. It was the consequence of the struggle he set into motion by seeking to fulfill the Buddha's intent, to fulfill the prophecy of the Encouraging Devotion. Again, that's where he read the sutra with his life. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. All right. That's how he was able to attain enlightenment, he says, by reading the sutra with his life. He set into motion by seeking to fulfill the Buddha's intent, widespread propagation, making everyone equal to himself. Okay? This proactive approach to life is a key that the Daishonin teaches his followers in the Opening of the Eyes, which is the teaching of the Soka philosophy, frankly. This proactive manner of life, this proactive practice of preaching and teaching the Buddhism of the sowing. That is the Soka philosophy. All right? It is differentiated from the other schools of Buddhism, which are happy with just bring in the money. The SGI has initiated just such a committed struggle in order to realize Kosen Rufu, the Buddha's will and decree. I didn't know he was going to say that. That's what I was referring to. Those who join in this struggle live in accord with the Buddha's will. They live as bodhisattvas of the earth, truly. They carry out the work of the thus come one, truly. Therefore, the infinite benefit of the mystic law, the essence of the Buddha's enlightenment, it manifests in the lives of the SGI. Of the SGI members. They are able, through their practice of the Soka philosophy, to attain actual Ichiren Sanzen. All right? The three pronouncement of the Treasure Tower chapter. In the opening of the eyes, as I mentioned earlier, Nichiren cites the sutra passages containing the three pronouncements of the Treasure Tower chapter. What time is it? 5 more minutes. Okay, I'm going to read through that and get over to here. Okay. And then I'm going to start with it again next week as a dictionary definition. In the opening of the eyes, as I mentioned earlier, Nichiren cites the sutra passages containing the three pronouncements of the Treasure Tower chapter. In the first pronouncement, Shakyamuni declares his wish to entrust the Lotus Sutra to those who will spread it in the strife-filled Sahe world after his passing, and he exhorts the bodhisattvas present to come forward and vow to carry out this mission. In fact, the entire ceremony in the air, which begins in the Treasure Tower chapter and ends in the Entrustment chapter, is a ceremony to entrust the bodhisattvas of the earth with the mission of propagating the Lotus Sutra. Does everybody understand that? All right? Do you understand? Mm-hmm. That's the first pronouncement. Right?
Yeah.
All right. In the second pronouncement, Shakyamuni indicates that the reason all Buddhas of the 10 directions, that is to say, throughout the universe, have gathered at the assembly of the Lotus Sutra in the Sahe world is to make certain the law will long endure. And he urges those present to openly state their vow to propagate the sutra after his passing. In other words, the perpetuation of the law in this troubled world is the will of all Buddhas throughout the universe. Again, to make everyone equal to themselves. Do you understand? That in itself underscores just how important it is that the law endures. The struggles of the Buddha, who awoke to this law of universal enlightenment and seeks to share it with others, would all come to naught if living beings in this troubled world could not attain Buddhahood. They cannot unless the bodhisattvas of the earth give rise and teach the correct teaching, right? In the Buddhism of the sowing. In the third pronouncement, Shakyamuni sets forth the 6 difficult and 9 easy acts, explaining how difficult it will be to propagate the sutra in the age after his passing. He commands the bodhisattvas to arouse a great aspiration and proclaim their vow to undertake this arduous challenge. All right? So, those are the 3 pronouncements of the Treasure Tower chapter. Next week, I will start by reading you I still got 3 minutes. Let me continue. Shakyamuni's evaluation of the relative merit of the sutras. Of these 3 pronouncements, Nichiren devotes the greatest discussion to the teaching of the 6 difficult and 9 easy acts, focusing on this teaching as a means for judging the relative merits of the different sutras. He goes on to consider the various sutras in light of whether they fall into the category of 6 difficult acts, a teaching that should be propagated after the Buddha's passing, or the category of the 9 easy acts, an inferior teaching. In short, the reason Shakyamuni expounds the 6 difficult and 9 easy acts and urges the bodhisattvas to propagate the Lotus Sutra after his demise is that this sutra constitutes the foremost teaching in that it assures enlightenment for all people of the evil age to come. Why? Because it's actually taught on the basis of the Buddha's enlightenment versus the capacity of common mortals. Do you understand? As Nichiren writes in the first part of the opening of the eyes, the doctrine of the true mutual possession of the 10 worlds and the true 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, the essential teaching for ordinary people to attain Buddhahood, actual Ichiren Sanzen, is hidden in the depths of the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra. Actual Ichiren Sanzen, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, is hidden in the in the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra. That is why the Lotus Sutra surpasses all other teachings, because it contains Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. In the outstanding principles of the Lotus Sutra, the great teacher Dingyo, founder of the Japanese Tendai school of Buddhism, writes with regards to the significance of the 6 difficult and 9 easy acts. Shakyamuni taught that the shallow is easy to embrace, but the profound is difficult. To discard the shallow and seek the profound is the way of a person of courage. In other words, Shakyamuni set forth the 6 difficult and 9 easy acts to teach that spreading a shallow teaching is easy, while propagating a profound teaching is difficult. Here we have Shakyamuni's own evaluation of the relative merits of the various sutras, a comparative classification based on which the Lotus Sutra is deemed profound and all other sutras shallow. Hence, Dingyo writes, Shakyamuni taught that the shallow is easy to embrace, but the profound is difficult. The various other sutras are easy to believe and easy to understand, because the Buddha expounded them according to the capacity of beings of the 9 worlds, a method known as preaching in accordance with the minds of others. The Lotus Sutra is difficult to believe and difficult to understand because the Buddha directly revealed his own enlightenment. In other words, he employed preaching in accordance with his own mind. Thus, Dingyo continues, to discard the shallow and seek the profound is the way of a person of courage. These are important words. By setting forth the 6 difficult and 9 easy acts and urging those gathered to take up the mission of propagation after his passing, Shakyamuni indicates his wish that his followers discard shallow teachings, the provisional Buddhism, everything other than the true teaching of the Lotus Sutra, and spread the profound teaching of the Lotus Sutra. So Shakyamuni indicates his wish that his followers discard shallow teachings and spread the profound teachings of the Lotus Sutra. Here, a person of courage means a trainer of people. The Buddha, bodhisattvas of the earth, manifesting in the latter day, going from the 9th world, the 9 worlds, and manifesting actualization and sanzen. That's who we are, a person of courage. We're persons of courage because we tackle the 6 difficult easy acts, or the 6 difficult acts. Here, a person of courage means a trainer of people, the Buddha, while the way of a person of courage means the Buddha's will. What is the Buddha's will? Widespread propagation. With regard to the propagation of his teachings after his death, the Buddha's will is that people should reject the shallow teachings which are easy to believe and understand, and instead adhere to the profound teaching of the Lotus Sutra, which is difficult to believe and understand. Shakyamuni himself established that the Lotus Sutra is his paramount teaching. Therefore, bodhisattvas who make the Buddha's intent their own will abide by this evaluation after his passing, discarding all other sutras and upholding and spreading this one supreme teaching. All right, and we'll continue on page 81, ignorance of the correct object of comparison, when we start again after we return from our trip to the States next week. So we'll take a week off and come back and finish this up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.